A hail of laser fire roared through the open doorway, charring the inside of the Fury's habitation dome where King's crew had hunkered down. The Anoran principal controllers were well equipped, and ruled their sector with iron fists, which often held tightly to rapid-fire laser rifles. King's crew cowered, sending the occasional half-hearted potshot in return as the squad of hulking grey-skinned controllers marched into the entryway, a wave of hot death blasting in front of them from Mark II Razor Storm rifles. The one stray shot of return fire that did clip a controller fizzled harmlessly into the chitinous composite of their tactical chest plate. In contrast, 3 of King's crew were ragdolled, with smouldering char marks across their heads and arms. "Lay down your weapons. You are charged with disturbing the Principality, smuggling, and sentient side." King's crew paused their retaliatory fire. The steel furnishings that stood as barricades between them and the controllers radiated residual heat from the barrage they had just sustained. They were a motley crew from all over the home system. A couple of the crew threw worried glances between themselves and to the only other door in the room. They began to raise their arms cautiously, weapons clattering to the steel-plated floors. A pair of the controllers stomped forward, their large stature amplified even more by the bulky green plates of their distinctive tactical armour. Alabest was the first to hit the floor, arms pinned behind her back and roughly forced into manacles. She hissed up at the controller, who pressed their boot into her back. As she coiled her neck to the side, she could see the line of controllers, silhouetted in the diffused light from the Hab Dome entryway. The light dimmed drastically, as a large shape eclipsed the entrance. Shocked controllers whipped around as King stooped to step into the Hab Dome. They raised their Razor Storm rifles towards him, the barrels wavering slightly as he towered over them, and he chuckled.
"Damn, you guys really made a mess of my ship."
A grin split his wide primate face.
"Let's clean it up, huh?"
Shards of green chitin composite whipped through the air, followed soon after by heavy ribbons of deep Anoran blood. The 5 controllers at the entryway were cleaved apart by a single swing of King's massive blade, a sharpened section of hull plating he'd torn off some unfortunate ship. Their bisected bodies collapsed to the ground to a stunned silence. Then a roar of celebration from King's crew tore through the air, and the real fight began. King's crudely crafted armour deflected laser fire as if it were nothing. No other sentient had the sheer strength and size to strap shuttle parts to themselves, nor would they consider it. His laughter echoed through the Hab Dome as he gleefully took to dismantling the controller squad with swift brutality. His crew tripped and distracted them at times, but mostly scrambled to get out of the way of his stomping feet and slashing blade. Mere seconds later, the violent melee settled down into a still scene of total destruction. King tossed his blade aside and sat himself down among the wreckage. He reached out and hoisted Alabest to her feet, from where she had pressed herself into a corner to avoid his rampage. His breathing quickly steadied to a slow, calm pace after his exertion. He casually flicked an errant entrail off her shoulder before giving her a gentle pat.
"So, where to next? I heard a D-class carrier vessel with palladium on the log sheet as a planned stop at Anohako 3. Fancy heading over there?"
Alabest nodded dumbly. She was slowly getting used to his murderous enthusiasm, but the shock still took a moment to wear off. "Grab some buckets and loot what you can, then we'll set course," she barked out to the rest of the crew as they picked themselves up and began to sift through the gore that covered their eating area. "Celestials curse him!" Prince Bayu Anora cast a fine goblet to the ground with his trunk. It shattered on his pristine marble flooring. The prince stepped in close to Greel, his golden finery clashing with the smart military uniform of the smaller Anoran. "Get that ship." He punctuated each word with a prod from his trunk on the chest of Greel. "Sire, perhaps we can request a bombardment from the array," the commander asserted cautiously. "No, I'll not have the System Council involved in my affairs. It's your job to capture these miscreants, and you must do so." He flopped down on the nearest elegant reclining bench, sulking. Greel retreated. He knew the prince would not listen to reason in this case. Perhaps he could destroy the ship at range and collect the pieces. Anything to avoid sending more good Anorans in to be decimated by that human psychopath. Rapid deceleration from point 4C lurched everyone within the poorly stabilised cabin of the Fury forward in their seats. King and Clayton's custom chairs dwarfed everyone else, whose seats skirted the modified cabin of the ship. Beyond the detailed HUD that spidered across the inside of the viewscreen, Anohako 3 hung in space. The station was 80 years old, but the intricate construction stood the test of time well. Spires of antennae and equipment reached out from the central structure to give the image of a crown, forged in steel and detailed in deep green paint, its beacon lights glowing bright orange at the tips, like sparkling gems. Far in the distance beyond the station, which floated alone on the outskirts of a dust system, the smallest speck of light could be seen. The HUD denoted this light as Anohako 1, the station which accompanied the gate which had brought the Anorans into contact with the home system. King turned his head as his navigator Hendel, the only Anoran on the ship, stood up from her seat and approached King cautiously. She looked up at him, some concern showing in the furrows across her grey brow. "This will antagonize the prince, boss." King raised an eyebrow.
"And?"
"He is childish." She sighed. "Without a matriarch, he cannot be a true king. He'll take any affront to his rule personally." She shook out her flat ears in discomfort. The gold rings pierced through them clinked. "I recommend we avoid further confrontation with his forces." King looked down at Hendel, a calm smile flickering at one side of his mouth.
"What's the ire of a prince to the wishes of a king?"
He winked jovially. Then he looked forward towards his quarry's destination. Soon, the Fury secluded itself in some remote debris within scanning range of the station. The ship was cobbled together from a wide range of space salvage, but it was built upon the structure of a Hickite Viper starship, a mid-sized battle-hardened craft with heavy weapons and a reasonably faint electrical signature. With the modifications they'd made in the few short weeks since King had commandeered it, it was shaping up to be an effective tool for piracy. Spatial decompression maps of the area blinked. A convoy was arriving, right on time. The long-range scanners on Anohako 1 swept the system. The orange glow of the night shift HUD lighting flickered like firelight at each cycle, as General Greel sat up in his command post, trunk casually lifting punt melons into his mouth. Nothing had come of his high alert positioning of the two fleets so far, but the prince's wrath towards his pirate had yet to diminish, and he would not return to Anoran space until the problem was dealt with. He settled in for a long night. Though he had officers to cover the shift, he couldn't sleep until his job was done. It would be his neck if the prince threw a tantrum when there was nothing to show from his mobilization of the fleets. But a blip. Weapon signatures. Anohako 3. "Get your asses out of bed!" He trumpeted over the station comms, rapidly dispatching alert notes to the two arms of the fleet. He activated a tactical relay with each fleet's command ship, and crunched down on another punt melon. "Let's see you weasel out of this one, ape." The relays flickered online, giving the general a three-dimensional display about his centrally positioned chair as the two fleets closed in. He gestured to the station's HUD to adjust his view and direct commands back and forth. The heavy bombard fleet would be the first to engage, and no amount of physical dominance could outmuscle a wave of plasma through space. Through holographic projection, the relays showed Greel's fleets closing in on Anohako 3. The heavy bombard fleet indicated that the long-range plasma cannons were charged, prepared to send an insurmountable blitz of high-energy matter in the direction of the small ship on their sensors, which was harrying a civilian trading convoy near the station. Greel cracked his thick knuckles and gestured to issue the command. Plasma surged through space, fragmented but reasonably precise at the 2,000 kilometer range. The small modified Hickite ship that was their target seemed pretty oblivious to the initial barrage headed its way. Greel leaned forward towards the projection of the targeted ship, waving his arms to enhance his perspective of the craft. Suddenly, the modified craft darted out of his magnified vision. He whirled his holographic perspective back, searching for the ship's tag on his HUD. A barrage failure report flagged up from his fleet's relay. There! The small ship had lurched forward in between the two main carrier ships of the civilian convoy, and now it clung to the space between the two of them, hiding like an insect in its hole. "That blasted pirate! Close in to short range!" The general spat through gritted teeth, gesturing wildly at the fleet relays. His second fleet of skirmishing ships, more well equipped for short-range ship-to-ship fighting, closed the distance rapidly. Though they'd show up on spatial compression maps, getting to short range before the pirates could escape was paramount. They'd lost the element of surprise with his first barrage anyway. The slippery little starship lurched once again, placing Anohako 3 between itself and the soon-to-arrive skirmisher fleet. Spatial compression maps pinged as it prepared to jump. "No, no, no!" His skirmisher fleet flashed out of subspace, spiraling into attack formations and angling themselves around the station as he gestured to highlight the pirate craft's position. The rapid interceptor craft quickly repositioned and began to loose laser, plasma, and missile fire at their target. Several volleys from all angles scarred the surface of the craft, blasting fragments of hull shielding and venting burning atmosphere into space in a bright burst. The ship buckled under the onslaught, then twisted into subspace, jumping away. Harsh alarms blared, lights flashing. The cockpit of King's ship rumbled as his beloved Fury lurched out of subspace. Through the smoke and noise, several members of the crew called out at the same time. "Decompression in the cargo bay. Blast doors holding. We've got fires in the ventilation system. Air quality dropping. King, what's the heading?" King had directed them to this nearby planetary cluster on a whim. No true understanding of its layout, but with a rough idea that one of them would be Earth-like. A moon with a blue and green surface. That was enough for him. With no time for their failing, and crude at the best of times, planetary scanners to confirm, he called out its direction.